Hey, ufuna la samke. Bakuqoshile sokapha.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our press conference. We are fully aware that it's a holiday, and we really appreciate you coming here on such an important day. Those of us who are familiar with charismatic churches, normally the pastor would say, it's nice to be here, and then the congregants say, but I don't think that's the case for you. But we really do appreciate everyone coming on this important day where we reconcile as a nation. With us we have the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, flanked by the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. He's also flanked by the Acting Director General of Justice and Constitutional Development. And we also have our National Commissioner for Correctional Services, Mr. Arthur Fraser. With that said, Minister, I'd like to hand over to you, that we may commence with the subject matter of today.
I think they've set this all up.
Oh, okay. I did not see that.
Okay.
I'm sure your mic is on.
Where do you switch it on? It's green, so is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, everyone, for coming on this day. So it might not be working. Yeah, it's on.
If you're not close enough.
Maybe I must just be very close. To the extent of kissing the mic. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. Deputy Minister, Mr. John Jeffrey. I must apologize on behalf of the other Deputy Minister, Nkosi Patekile Olomisa. He could not be with us here today because of a family commitment. The National Commissioner of Correctional Services, Mr. Arthur Fraser, the Acting Director General of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, Advocate J.B. Skosana, officials from Correctional Services and the Department of Justice, ladies and gentlemen of the media, thank you for attending this media briefing, especially on a public holiday. These days stem from our difficult past as a nation. Post-1994, we've dedicated this day to reconciling our differences as a nation. On this day, we are required to unify the nation and honestly reflect on whether we are committed to building one united nation. Our white paper on corrections implores us to facilitate reconciliations with individuals who offend the community. It states the following. The department must address the reconciliation of the offender with the community and heal the relationship with the victims. This includes restoration of trust and the laws where applicable, as an integral part of rehabilitation and reintegration. Non-reconciliation with the community increases the risk of recidivism and offender remains alienated from the community. Where our courts have handed down sentences, justice must be served. We will never compromise on incarcerating offenders who have been sentenced to imprisonment by our courts. We are committed to create a safer and secure communities. Therefore, we will never sacrifice public safety, as we have made it our mission to securely incarcerate hardened criminals and those who are considered to be a danger to society. Our facilities, such as the recently opened CIMEX Correctional Center at Hoshimampuru, the second management area in Tshwane, enables us to achieve some of these objectives. In our correctional facilities, there are offenders whose offenses range from serious and violent crimes to minor economic offenses. Some offenders, if they had the means to pay their fines, they will not even be in our correctional facilities. Our correctional facilities should therefore not only be seen as buildings to keep offenders away from society, but also as correctional centers that rehabilitate offenders through programs in order to integrate them back into their communities as law-abiding, responsible citizens. We have taken into consideration all the relevant facts that led to the incarceration of certain offenders. When offenders are placed at correctional facilities, individuals' correctional sentence plans are formulated for each and every one of them. These plans focus on the behavior of offenders, which must be corrected, and goals set which offender must complete for him and how to effectively be rehabilitated. Our correctional facilities have played a pivotal role to rehabilitate offenders. It is thus important that ex-offenders to utilize the second chance by means of plowing back into society through the skills that they will have acquired. Amongst our ex-offenders, we have successful business people and those who have found gainful employment in various sectors of the economy upon their release. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate one of the rehabilitated offenders, Blessing Ngobeni, for recently winning the Standard Bank Young Artist Award for Visual Arts and for the past and the future. Blessing Ngobeni spent 6 years in our correctional facility at Lokop, and that is where he found art through the Tsoga Wake Up Arts Project. He is a good example of a person who has grabbed his second chance upon release. His artwork is making waves across the globe. Yet there are also those who are released from correctional centers who tell us that they often experience discrimination, stigmatization, a denial of work opportunities, and prevention to participate in community structures. This contributes towards reoffending and does not help to participate in community structures. This contributes towards reoffending and does not help to integrate offenders into society. We call upon society to reconcile with these individuals and to play an active role as citizens to collectively reintegrate rehabilitated individuals. What are the ways of releasing offenders from our centers? There are various ways in which inmates can be released from our centers or from prison. One, a person has completed his or her sentence. Secondly, a person who is released on parole. People on parole are still under our supervision through community corrections. Thirdly, remissions of sentence. This is where the President uses the power vested on him by the Constitution and the Correctional Services Act to grant remissions, which effectively means cutting the sentence short of the offender. It also means it fast-tracks the dates upon which an inmate will be placed on parole, subject to meeting a set criteria. Medical parole is a release granted to offenders on medical or humanitarian conditions governed by the Correctional Services Act. A presidential pardon. The President can grant a pardon on various grounds to inmates inside and outside our centers. It should be noted that since 1994, a sitting president has not yet exercised his powers to grant a presidential pardon to a person inside our centers. But it does not mean it cannot happen. Each pardon is considered on its own merits and on its case. So it has not been done since 1994. All the pardons that the president has granted or any sitting president has granted were of people who are outside our centers. This power is visited upon on very exceptional circumstances and grounds. It is against this background that His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa has today, during the Day of Reconciliation commemoration in Bergville, KwaZulu-Natal, announced a decision to remit the sentence expiry dates of specific categories of sentence offenders, probationers and parolees, across all correctional facilities in the country. The decision taken by the President is in line with the established international practice and informed by the powers given to him by Section 84(2)(j) of the Constitution, which provides that the President is responsible for pardoning or retrieving offenders and remitting any fines, penalties, or forfeitures. Remission of sentence are not unique to South Africa. In recent months, we have seen countries like Thailand, Ghana, and Kenya using this as a policy tool to reduce the sentences of offenders who are deemed to have been rehabilitated. Remission also assists in alleviating overcrowding in our facilities. However, we must stress that remissions are not a solution to overcrowding. In addition, we continue to use our multi-pronged strategy on overcrowding, which includes, amongst others, improving corrections and development programs which the department to enhance the facilitation of rehabilitation that targets offending behavior and managing levels of remand detainees through the integrated justice system and its development committee, as well as various special subcommittees, including the intersectoral committee on child justice. Through policy reform, we will ensure that our criminal justice system does not criminalize poverty Most of the people whose sentences will be remitted are individuals who could not afford to pay fine and a bail. Noted, overcrowding of correctional facilities is fueled by large numbers of remand detainees who cannot post bail, repeat offending by people who, because of their criminal records, cannot find work after their release, and by the overuse of short sentences. It is important to note that President Ramaphosa made the announcement while we are commemorating the days of reconciliation and also celebrating 25 years of democracy. This should remind all of us as the progress we have made as a nation and continue to make in promoting national unity and reconciliation in a democratic South Africa. Presidential remissions in South Africa were last exercised in 2012 when former President Jacob Zuma granted special remissions in celebration of Freedom Day on the 27th of April 2012, where a total of 45,033 offenders, 19,695 sentence offenders, and 25,338 probationers and parolees were released in a project that was concluded on the 6th of July 2012. On the 30th of May 2005, former President Thabo Mbeki also granted special remissions to 65,837 offenders, of whom 31,865 were sentenced offenders and 33,972 probationers and parolees, and they were released over a period of 3 to 9 months. Remissions were also granted on the 10th of May 1994 at the former President Nelson Mandela's inauguration, and again on the 27th April 1995 on the first anniversary of South Africa's freedom. It was again granted on the 18th of July 1998 on Mandela's 80th birthday. The previous remissions were granted to coincide with key national days, and this one is no different. In previous remissions, 2005, 0.24%, in 2012, 0.25%, less than 1% of the remitted individuals re-offended or again committed crime. South Africa's offender population as at the end of November 2019 is as follows: 163,015 across the country, 243 correctional centers for both sentence and remand detainees, 70,930 parolees and probationers under the system of community corrections. These are offenders who are no longer in correctional facilities but are already in communities. Therefore, this says that the total of offender population is 233,945. What should be noted is that more than two-thirds of 71.3% of the beneficiaries to be considered for the 2019 presidential review of sentence expiry dates are already in communities as parolees and probationers and not in correctional facilities. In terms of inmates within correctional centers, less than 10%, 8.99% of the total inmate population of 163,015 will be considered. Of those to be considered in correctional facilities, the greater part that is eligible for this remission is 14,647 inmates are closer to their parole consideration dates. Therefore, should they be granted parole, they will be released into the system of community corrections as parolees and will be closely monitored by correctional services officials until their sentence expiry dates. To this end, in 2019 special remission project is targeted approximately 84.7% of probationers already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 11,556 out of the total probationers of 13,644. 48.98% of parolees already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 24,833 out of the total parolees of 50,700. 51.30% of the total community corrections population already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 36,389 out of the community corrections population of 70,930. 8.99% of South Africa's total inmate population in correctional centers, 14,647 out of the inmate population of 163,000 2015, and less than one-third, 21.81% of South Africa's total offender population, 51,036 out of the offender population of 233,945. The following are the categories for the 2019 special remission. These special remissions of sentences will not be applicable to any sentence offenders, probationers, parolees, or day parolees who is serving for any of the sexual offenses, murder and attempted murder, armed robbery, certified as mentally ill and is detained in accordance with the Mental Health Act 2002, sedition, high treason, sabotage, and terrorism. Offenders declared as dangerous by the court in terms of Section 286A of the Criminal Procedure Act 51 of 1977, sentenced to life imprisonment. Any escaped absconded offender who evaded the justice system after being released on bail pending appeal and was still at large on the 16th of December 2019. Violations under the Domestic Violence Act 1998, child abuse. As a responsive government, we have deliberately excluded these types of offenses from the special remissions process because we understand the sensitivity they are carrying in our society. Offenders who are classified to be of low risk will receive an additional 12 months. Notable offenders for violence crime who have served almost the minimum required time for parole consideration will only be granted 12 months special remission. The process will include all justice, crime prevention and security cluster departments, including the South African Police Service and the Department of Home Affairs, who will verify the details of every eligible offender. This process is estimated to run from the date of pronouncement by the President in a phased approach until a successful completion in order to ensure the smooth reintegration of offenders into society. And it is envisaged that the process will commence with the release of women, children, youth, and people with disabilities, and will then move on to other categories of offenders. Attendance of pre-release programs by offenders will also be a prerequisite before any release. Furthermore, sentenced offenders who may not have participated in other relevant programs will be prioritized for such pre-release programs before being considered for the release. The risk and relapse probability report is one of the key tools that is going to be utilized to assess and mitigate any risk associated with reoffending. The JCPS Cluster Technical Task Team has been established to focus, amongst others, on looking at the list of offenders who are foreign nationals that are to be considered for remission. This technical task team will manage the review of the citizenship status to the foreign nationals to be done by the Department of Home Affairs, as well as verification of fingerprints and DNA analysis to be done by the South African Police Service. The process of granting these remissions of sentences will be fair, non-discriminatory, and transparent. The remissions are also done within the context of government's overall program of strengthening the criminal justice system. It is worth noting that South Africa has adopted the revision of the standard of minimum rules for treatment of prisoners, which are called the Nelson Mandela rules. This has enabled us to speed up transformation towards a people's developmental correctional system, consistent with various international principles and guidelines, and fully aligned to the UN and African human rights declarations and protocol. To give effect to these rules, the rehabilitation and social integration of South Africa's offender population is being accelerated across all correctional facilities. As a country, we pride ourselves in establishing a correctional system whose purpose is not only to punish, but to rehabilitate the offender, to protect the public, to promote social responsibility, and to enhance the human development of offenders in order to avoid repeat offending. In conclusion, Correctional Services has made significant strides in redefining the purpose of corrections in South Africa. We appeal to all South Africans to work together with the department to reintegrate offenders who will benefit from this special remissions process back into society. We acknowledge that it is often difficult and challenging to strike a balance between forgiveness and justice. According to a paper titled Forgiveness and Justice, published by Professor Worthington, Everest et al., the following is observed. Most psychologists agree that forgiveness does not imply forgetting. condoning or excusing offenses. Forgiveness does not necessarily imply reconciliation, trust, or release from a legal accountability. Instead, many psychologists contend that forgiveness involves a conscious decision, while acknowledging the seriousness of the wrong, to release or forgo bitterness and vengeance. The paper goes on to argue that, ideally, offenders will appreciate expressions of forgiveness, assuming that they acknowledge some responsibility for wrongdoing. Perpetrators may feel grateful to receive forgiveness, especially if forgiveness seems undeserved. The resulting feeling of gratitude, or perhaps guilty at being over-benefited, may motivate offenders to reciprocate the goodwill through improved behavior. Our stalwarts for freedom and democracy, Tata Nelson Mandela, once said, "In the end, reconciliation is a spiritual process, which requires more than just a legal framework. It has to happen in the hearts and minds of the people." Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. With that, colleagues, I would open for a row of 5 hands, and we'll take questions about the heart and mind of the people. Number 1, number 2, 3. Okay, in that order. 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Lauren here from Bidder. Just wondering if the minister could talk a little bit more about the department's plan to rehabilitate some of the members of the good government. If there's any plans
Members of the
for
You can't be rehabilitated before you think.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. My questions are three. One of them relates to the judgment by the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria last week, which overturned your predecessor's decision, Martin Masuta, to grant parole for Yanis Ramush, saying that you need to go back and review this particular decision. As a man from the legal fraternity, can you honestly sit there and let your good conscience stand there and say that Yanis Ramush has not paid his debt to the country for whatever time or sin that he may have committed, should he be released on parole or not? What is your conscience saying about that? And are there any political connotations to him not being released on parole at this point in time? And then lastly, are you releasing King Dalinje and Kanya Tageshe, who has spent the past 2 years in prison and has been seeking to the pardon from the Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, and also on the issue of King Dalinje, who was sentenced to life in 2015? What's the status of those who are they part of those whom you will be releasing this time around? Thank you.
Number 3.
Sorry, I don't think we'll just wait till we hope for Christmas.
We must first answer whether it will benefit or not.
Okay, are there any other questions? So this might say 5. So far we've got 3 questions.
Question, we've got one in Cape Town.
Okay, we can take that.
Hi, Karen Horn. I was just wondering if you could give us a little bit more detail on who exactly will qualify for these remissions, and what does it mean, you know, what kind of length of sentence are we talking about? Because in the case of King Dalindyebo, he was obviously looking at 15 years, and in Mr. Kekeshi's case, I think it was in the region of 2. He was eligible for parole in February. So you're looking at 2 very different prison sentences, and I'm just interested in how the remission of sentence will work in terms of that. How many, you know, what kind of length of remission are you granting? And then second of all, in relation to the media reports on the weekend about you seeking an audience with the Dubai authorities about the potential extradition of the Guptas, If you could just provide clarity on that, because is there actually an extradition application in court for those family members? And if not, and if those reports are to be believed, is it appropriate to be making political overtures in a circumstance which needs to be dealt with in the courts there? Is that not some form of political overreach, if true? Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Over to you, Minister.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have explained that there will be those that will benefit 12 months and there will be an additional 12 months for a specific category of low-risk offenders who are not involved in violent crime. Indeed, King Dalindyebo did make an application for a presidential pardon. That application is still on the table of the president. It has not yet been considered. When the president has considered that application, he will make an announcement about his decision in that regard. So it is still on the table. With regard to whether he will benefit on a remission or not, he will benefit on the remission, and his benefit is 12 months, which means that he's going to cut his sentence by 12 months. So in October, the king was already eligible for parole, to apply for parole and be considered for parole. So the 1 year also give him a benefit. That means that through operational processes between the commissioner, his family, and the king himself, a process will be undertaken in terms of when and how he will be released. That is an operational process. But from this decision, he does benefit the 12 months. Kanya Tegeshe also benefit 12 months. He's supposed to be released, I think, somewhere in terms of parole. It could be somewhere in February or so. But therefore, this decision means that he becomes eligible for parole immediately. He can then apply for those processes. And in an operational process between the regional commissioner in Gauteng, his family, and Mr. Tegeshe himself, a proper processes will unfold that will then determine when can he be released and go out. Because each and every offender will be dealt with on his own merits and demerits. A process will be undertaken for him, Mr. Tegeshe, biometrics for everyone that we are going to release, everything in terms of the risk, everything that relates to whether he can be released and so forth. I think the Gauteng regional commissioner will at some point be able to state, but this decision means he qualifies for parole immediately. With regard to his application for a presidential pardon, I had already stated previously that his attorneys did write to us and requested that we help him with the issue of a presidential pardon. My predecessor previously had stated to the country and to the fees must fall activists that he is willing to help them with the process of application for either presidential pardon, expungement, or any other processes that could help them with regard to their processes. I answered the same thing on the 27th of August in Parliament, that we remain ready to help this category of students who were involved in some kind of misdemeanor with our criminal justice system. And I was shocked when I further confirmed that we remain ready to help with that process of a presidential pardon with the response we received from the nation. It was like we have said he has received it. It is my job to advise the president on presidential pardons. It comes through the Department of Justice. We process it. We have got forms that will help. And it is for the president to agree or disagree with our processes. But it's important for us to help whoever wants to apply for a presidential pardon, because we are then able to say these are the factors that the president may likely consider. There is no hard and fast rule. There is no policy. But we have got matters where people have been granted pardons in the past, who were outside, who have said, look, I was convicted in 1970 for a crime that I have committed then, but now I can no longer do my job. I'm not getting promotion, I'm not getting that because of a criminal record. Can the president help me with the pardon? which the president has done on various of them. The only thing that has not yet happened up to now is to give a pardon to somebody who is inside prison. In some instances, it may warrant that it can be given. In some, it may warrant that it may not be given, depending on the circumstances and the merits of each case. So with regard to Khaya Kageshe, the process of pardon had to be pended because he took a route of appealing. So his pardon is not at this stage is waiting the outcome of the Supreme Court of Appeal or the Constitutional Court. Whatever the outcome will be there, it is then that if he still wants us to help him, we may consider the issue. But on the part of remission, he does benefit. I'm not sure if I've answered all the questions.
You've got Wallace.
Oh, the Walus one. Maseko. I nearly forgot that one.
And you've got Dubai.
Oh, and Dubai.
Will the Gupta family be rehabilitated?
Oh,
First
okay.
question.
Will the Gupta family be rehabilitated? I think that's the first question. You have to be sentenced before you can be rehabilitated. The due process must take you through. Then when you arrive in our centers, we take you through a process of rehabilitation with social workers, with psychologists, with whatever help that we may deem necessary to assist you with the process of rehabilitation. Indeed, later this evening, we will be going to the UAE, attending a United Nations conference on anti-corruption. It is not uncommon, I heard from Cape Town, that it is not uncommon that when we attend these kind of events, you will have bilateral engagements with your counterparts. And as that, we will have various bilateral engagements in the UAE with whoever that we may deem necessary. But already an advanced team from the department and from the National Prosecuting Authority, they are already in the UAE. The conference started today. I should have been there by today. But the reason I could not leave yesterday is because of this announcement by the president. So I had to be here so that I can give you the full details of what does this remission mean. And I know that they've started the conference, engagements are happening. As and when the clarity is there, we will be able to give to the nation whatever that clarity that is needed. But whether there is political overreach or not, there is no political overreach. The Department of Justice is the central authority through which extradition, mutual legal assistance, or any other thing that needs international cooperation goes through. It goes through us. We sign them, we engage with whoever from any other country that relates to the issue of mutual legal assistance or signing of extradition treaties and agreements and all that. What we do not do is to send questions and investigations. That then is the job of the law enforcement authorities, which becomes the NPA and the police. That becomes an operational issue which will have to be attended to by the NPA and the police in terms of questions and so forth. It's not like we're going to Dubai with a suitcase to fetch the Guptas. It is done through the law. What we are going to engage with them there is the issue that there has been an extradition treaty that we have already signed, our parliament has ratified. It has not yet been ratified in Dubai or in the UAE. So it's an important issue for us as a Department of Justice because it's us who engage with our counterparts in any country if an extradition treaty has not been ratified. But although it might not have been ratified and so forth, there are still international instruments that still allows law enforcement agencies to cooperate. And it is that engagement that must still be pursued, must still be operationalized by the relevant law enforcement agencies. And ourselves as a country, we are saying they must use those channels, they must do their job. If they want to meet whoever, the NPA, the guys we are going with to the United Nations, we have given them the freedom to do so. If they feel that there is some evidence or any information that they need, the international treaties, they are those that guide them and may allow them to engage on some processes. At this stage, we believe we will get cooperation and hopefully at some stage the extradition treaty will be ratified and all papers will be on the table for the law enforcement agencies to continue to do their job. Oh, the Walus one. Hey, I always forget this one. Maybe it's because I don't want to answer it somewhere. But this one is a nice question because the court has given me 60 days. I'm still within the 60 days. When I've made a decision, I will invite you, like I will have invited you here, to tell you that this is now our decision on Walus. At this stage, we are still studying the judgment. You know, learned colleagues like to say we're studying the judgment. We're also studying it.
Okay, colleagues, follow-up questions. Let me just check with Cape Town if there's a follow-up question.
No, we're fine, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, number one. Number two. Steve, your hand up. Okay, number one.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Cody from Business Day. I just wanted to find out what is the reason behind the UAE not having ratified the treaty yet, and when did South Africa sign it? How long has this been lagged? Thank you.
2018?
Minister, on the issue of the what could be the reason, since you got to the department, what, when you go through the various documentation, the reasons given as to why your department then under Malcolm Masuja was against the release of the Anish or declined his application for parole on his sentence. And as I was saying on, when you looked at the time he spent in prison and he's gone through these particular records, do you not think that he's paid whatever he needed to pay for his sins that he may have committed at the time to the death of the former General Secretary of the Communist Party, Chris Hunt?
The answer is the same. I'm still studying the judgment. When I have studied it properly, like my learned colleagues, I will then call a press conference, or we will communicate to the public that we have now studied the judgment and this is our decision. At this stage, we are not ready to answer that question. It's not like we don't want to answer it. We are just not ready to answer it. We will answer it when we are ready, when we have studied the judgment.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Oh, there's a question there.
Just from a practical point of view, how long, you talk about operational process, how long does it normally take? Is it months or weeks?
As you have heard, it's thousands of people. It takes, the last one took 3 months. Remember I said it started in April, it ended somewhere in July or June. It can take between today to 3 months to 9 months, and yeah, it's a long, audacious process because it involves processing each and every individual with the details, with biometrics, with the pre-release report, with all those things. So it is a tedious process. But a person who has been processed can also be released tomorrow morning. Can be released on Thursday, on Saturday, next week, on January. That's how it's going to happen. So that's why it becomes difficult for us to say, this one will be released tomorrow. Because that then becomes a process that happens at the center. And then the center and the family and that person will say, this one by Christmas, as we're asking, will be at home, or we are unable to process his thing or whatever. But as things stand now, the process has started.
Question? We've got one question in Cape Town.
Sure.
Sorry, Minister, if I can just, in the case of Mr. Kekeshe, it's been reported that he is on suicide watch and has suffered a quite profound form of mental breakdown as a result of his incarceration. Is that a factor that will be considered in sort of looking at people who will possibly be, this process will be undertaken quicker than others? Because as you point out, he is eligible for parole quite soon, so there is a very imminent possibility that if he isn't prioritized, he'll be released on parole before the remission actually affects him.
Yeah, no, all factors are looked at, and such factors are also looked at. But you will know that with regard to medical issues, there's a different process of medical parole and so forth. But it does weigh into this process that we are involved in. as a factor to be looked at.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes our press conference for today.
Which one?
Oh, the ratification. The ratification.
No,
of
I
the
answered it. I said it was in 2018.
2018.
Sorry, Minister. No, what I also asked was, what is the reasoning behind why they have not?
Oh, no, we don't know.
And then just
That's what we need to establish in these meetings. It's not like, as I've said before, we're carrying a bag to come back with the Guptas. It's those things that we will need to establish why, and if there's a problem, how can we resolve it, all those kind of issues. But that process has started a long time ago, but this is another opportunity because almost everyone, because they are hosting a United Nations conference, who can make a decision will be there.
But sorry, Minister, I just also want to say, you said 2018. Can you be more specific than that? Has it effectively been more than a year that the UAE has had this?
Okay, that information is on our website. I can definitely send you exactly when the treaty was ratified by South Africa and when it was ratified by Parliament. That information that I can give to you is easily available. Okay.
You want to ask?
That concludes our press
No,
conference. Is there
okay.
anything you want to
No,
add?
just on that, I unfortunately I can't remember when it. I mean, it was ratified before the elections by both houses of Parliament. I think it was last year, towards the end. But as Crispin has said, we can give the direct information as to when the actual dates of ratification. It gets ratified once it's ratified by both houses of each house of Parliament.
Okay. Once more, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out on a holiday. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fine. You too. Yeah.